Hello from Washington. I'm Navbahor Imamova, and I have Ambassador Spratlen here all the way from Tashkent. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Navbahor, for having me. It's a delight to be here today.
Thank you so much, always. We know the special reason why you've been here for the
Yes.
past few days, and we specifically wanted to chat with you at the end of President Mirziyoyev's official visit to Washington. It just ended. He flew out of Andrews Airport just a few hours ago, and everybody seems to be ecstatic. They're so happy. You know, I just talked to Lisa Curtis in the White House, President Trump's special assistant on the region, and now I have you talking to me. What is this excitement about? It's not like Uzbekistan has not existed before.
Well, it is true that Uzbekistan has been around for a long time, and the bilateral relationship is now about 27 years old. But the Uzbekistan that we are talking about and have been talking about this week is something new. And I think that's the reason why everybody is so excited. The word I kept hearing over and over and over again as we went through all the meetings and the events was historic. And I would say that the visit is historic in the sense that this was President Mirziyoyev's first trip. It was his wife's first trip, as far as I know, to Washington. And the breadth of issues covered, the size of the deals that were signed, the number of people who came with him, the way he was received in Washington, all of this is new. And that's why I think everybody's very, very excited. And I know, as the U.S. ambassador, having been there for almost 3.5 years, this is not something I ever could have dreamed of. When I arrived in Uzbekistan in January of 2015, I think we really are living with something new, and that's why everybody's so excited.
And you have been working, I mean, I always say this, you're a true Central Asia expert in a sense that you've worked on the region for a long time.
Yes.
I remember covering your work when you were the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Central Asia.
Yes, that's right.
And those were the times when Ambassador Kamilov, currently the Foreign Minister of Uzbekistan, was in Washington, and those were the cold days,
Yes.
you know, very limited communication between the two governments. So the relationship obviously has come a long way,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And so when we talk about this new strategic partnership, it sounds great. You know, everybody's promising so much to each other. Why should we be so hopeful about it? Because the strategic partnership that was born in 2002, in many ways, went nowhere eventually.
Well, that's a very sharp way to put things. Let me just congratulate you on being accredited, because I think that is part of the reason that we're talking about things that are new and what is exciting. This is not something that's happened before. You having the opportunity to go and report for the Voice of America from Tashkent in the way that and all of Uzbekistan, in the way that you are now going to be able to do. And I think that's just one small sign of many that we are seeing now. We are seeing companies go and talk about new sectors like solar power that we haven't been talking about before. We are talking about broadening English language programs and working in that sector, in the university sector, in a way we have not worked before. We are, of course, talking about working on the security relationship. That's always been an important part. But I think that it's exciting because concrete achievements occurred over the last week. And those achievements were part of something that started in September of 2016 and has steadily been growing. And of course, with the joint statement, with all of the meetings that have been taking place, with all the contacts that were made, I think people are excited about the possibilities. The visit wasn't something that happened and now we close the book. The visit is a whole new chapter. In fact, this joint statement talks about a new era in the relationship. I would want to give more credit to the 2002 partnership, because that really established the foundation of what we could dream about. It's a very comprehensive document if you actually read it. For all kinds of reasons, we weren't able to allow that document to realize its full potential. But now, because we have interest on the US side, interest on the Uzbek side, a whole vast array of people who are working for the governments in both countries, who are working for the private sector, who now want to put meat on the bones. They want this to be real. And I think that's why we're excited, and that's why we have the potential to help Uzbekistan realize its potential in a way we have not before. And it isn't really only about the United States. I think the excitement is going to be about other countries as well, and certainly in the region as part of President Mirziyoyev's Good Neighbor policy. I was just in a meeting today when people were talking about the jump in investment and trade just between countries. In a country like Turkmenistan, going from a tiny few million before to over 100 million now. I mean, those kinds of things are possible because people are thinking. It was near zero with Afghanistan, and there's a whole new conversation taking place about that. So we are in a new era. I'm pleased to be part of it. You're part of it, and I think we have a lot to be excited about for the future.
Yeah. And it's a major test. I'm sure you agree with me when I say that, for both sides.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So, to what extent this will be carried through. Very interestingly, when especially the officials at Pentagon mentioned 2002, I was like, well, are you sure you want to go there? Why don't you just kind of, push it aside and start something new? But as you just said, the reference to 2002 is remarkable.
Yes, it is a foundation, and now we can build on it finally.
And everybody remembers that.
Yes.
That is also very interesting.
It's interesting because I think there's always been a sense of hope about Uzbekistan. People have recognized that this country is so important to the region's future. And so the question is, how can we find that common ground where we can work together to build enough trust so that both sides can benefit? It's not a transactional relationship where I try to get this and you try to get that, but we really are trying to build a partnership. And that really takes a lot of effort. The 2002 partnership was the beginning of it. Now we have so much more to work with.
You mentioned something about the importance of the visit. Why are these visits so important?
Well, one of the things I always like to talk to people about when I'm talking about Uzbekistan is the importance of the human factor. We have tea on the table. What does tea symbolize? Tea symbolizes that we are talking together and that we expect to be here for a while. I love the story about how you don't fill the teacup up all the way because you want that conversation to go. And why? Because human relationships are important. And what are visits about? They're about building those relationships. Because it is only through those relationships that we can actually accomplish the things we want to accomplish, right?
You have been having so many official visits. I mean, there was a time when only people with the military uniforms would visit Uzbekistan. You don't have that anymore. I know that the Uzbek embassy here also gets exhausted with all the visits and delegations, and the same goes to, the same applies to Tashkent, to the U.S. embassy there. What is in all of these things for the Uzbek people? They get to watch on Uzbek television, obviously, that people are visiting, coming and going. Why do these visits matter?
The visits matter because we're talking about where we can build a partnership. What can we actually do together? And it's important on both sides for people to understand, who are we talking about? Who are Uzbek people? Where is Uzbekistan? What does it really mean for the United States? I know for myself, I was recently in the Fergana Valley, and those trips are so important because they let me see what is really happening. I can see Namangan, I can see Margilan, and that's what happens when we have people visit as well. We recently had, for example, our Deputy Assistant Secretary, Randy Berry, who covers the issue of human rights. Now, for many, many years, this topic was a very sensitive one, and it was difficult for us to have conversations about it, difficult for us to meet and talk eye to eye about it. Now, that's possible. His visit really changed the way he saw Uzbekistan. He had a chance to meet all kinds of people. He had a chance to meet officials in the government. And I think it's only through seeing things with your own eyes, hearing things with your own ears, having that conversation with your own voice, that's how you get to know the situation, and that builds the trust. And that's what you really need for the relationship, and that's what's happening now. What does it mean for the people? Hopefully, it will mean eventually opportunities. It will mean, I know there are many, many young people who want to work with us on learning English. We hope that that will be expanding so that those people who want to learn English will have more opportunities to do that, not just in Tashkent, but in other places as well. It hopefully will mean that business partnerships will be established between American companies and Uzbek companies, and that'll be good for people who want to work, that'll be good for local officials who need the tax revenue, that'll be good for the business people themselves who want to sell their goods and services. So I think there will be concrete elements of this for many, many people. And I think it will also be good for understanding. In the past, we've had a limited number of tourists, for example, who are from the United States who would visit Uzbekistan. And it means that only a select group of people know about this wonderful country. Hopefully, now that things are opening up, more people will get to know about Uzbekistan, and hopefully more people from Uzbekistan will come to know the United States as well. So we get to know each other so that even though we are geographically very distant from one another, we can see where that common ground is and understand each other better.
So Ambassador Spratlen, organizing visits obviously means a lot of work for people like you for both sides. What it is like to work with the Uzbek government now? What is the intergovernmental relationship like? Because, you know, there's so much talk about reforms, right? But reform should mean that the government changes the way it functions.
Right.
And many people want to know, Uzbeks specifically, how the government works now. What has changed about the way the Uzbek administration operates?
Well, the one word I would use to describe the difference is more openness. And I would say, here's where I would say the United States Embassy and the Uzbek people have something in common. In the past, it was very difficult, say, for Uzbek citizens if they had a problem. They couldn't get a pension payment, or they didn't have heat in their apartment. Where could they go to take that issue? There was really no place to do that. Then the virtual cabinet opened up, and then the reception centers. So people had not only a place to go to lodge their complaints, but they had somebody there to listen. I would say the same thing is happening in the diplomatic arena. In the past, anytime we wanted to talk to the government about something, we had to write something out formally, send it in a note, send it to them, wait for a response. And the good thing about that is that all of our requests for contact were on the record. Nobody could say that they hadn't heard. We knew. And these notes fulfilled their purpose, but they also slowed things down, and they made it difficult for us to talk together. What is happening now is not entirely, but it's a lot easier to pick up the phone and actually talk to people. Sometimes we can send emails.
People don't get scared when you call them?
No, they don't. In fact, people are calling me. Mr. Kuchkarov and was trying to reach me. I've talked to Mr. Khajayev, the Minister of Foreign Trade, on the phone.
Huh?
So the level of openness, the feeling that now it's possible for us to connect with one another, means that we can begin to have a more normal relationship. This is something that Ambassador Wells asked for when she was in Uzbekistan earlier this year, and we have begun to see that opening. So just as the Uzbek people are seeing the opening with their own government, we are seeing the opening with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and some of the other ministries. And what that means is the pace of activity can grow, and our understanding of what we really need from one another can grow as well, because when you're only talking through documents, you're going to miss things. You need that real-time connection, and so now that is beginning to happen, and it's making things much easier. So I would say that that's what I'm seeing in terms of the way things are operating. Obviously, a visit, just going back to your question about organizing it, is a phenomenal enterprise, and I do want to give huge credit to Ambassador Vahabov. He has a small embassy staff, much smaller than mine, and even with that small embassy staff, with him and his DCM, Karimbai Sultanov, and all of the team there, they did a fabulous job in a very, very short period of time. And I also want to commend my team, because everything from making sure we understood the transportation arrangements to issuing visas to a large number of people, it all happened. It all came together, and every one of those individual actions was necessary to making the visit a success. So it really proved that embassies are important institutions, both the one here in Washington that represents Uzbekistan and ours in Tashkent that represents the United States.
How long does it take to plan something like this once there is a will to meet?
Well,
at such a level, at a presidential level?
What I would say is, here's where President Trump is a unique individual, because we have only known about this visit for a couple of months. We have not known about this for a very long time. I think the seeds were planted when Lisa Curtis, with whom you met recently, she came to Uzbekistan, as you know, to the Samarkand conference last November, and I think the light went off in her head about, we can begin to work with this country in a new way. But actually getting the senior level approval for the visit and then starting the work on it, this is really something that has happened with unprecedented speed. getting all of those agreements that were signed over at Blair House, getting all of the papers, all of the agreements, that happened lickety-split compared to what would normally be true in a visit. So really, hats off to the entire U.S. government and to the Uzbek government for making that all happen. Because I would say this all took place much more quickly than would normally be true for a visit of this level.
Wow. I have to tell you that the Ministry of Justice, Ruslan Bekdavletov, came to the Voice of America to give us an interview.
Excellent.
And he wanted to discuss reforms. We wanted to discuss reforms. But he also said something very interesting. He said, let's talk about challenges. Like there is so much talk about accomplishments and whatever the progress is so far, but let's also talk about challenges. And we talked about the lack of expertise, lack of experience within the system, and what will it take for the entire Uzbek system to essentially reform, because you're talking about fundamental problems in every sector, right? So what we saw this week in Washington was that U.S. knows that Uzbekistan is struggling. It's a tough time for the people. And people are realizing that making any kind of a change is a really, really difficult journey. It's a process, and it needs a lot of time, but also it needs a lot of labor. How can U.S. help realistically, based on the level of the political will here now and there too? And Uzbeks at this point are saying that we're open to discuss anything, right?
That's right.
The field is wide open. What can the people of Uzbekistan expect in terms of, helping reform?
Well, reform is a big word, and it's a big word in any country that undertakes it, especially considering the breadth of the reforms that President Mirziyoyev envisions in his 5-year strategy that was unleashed last February. What I would say is, I've actually asked one of the senior level ministers this question. I said, what are the biggest challenges? And the two answers I got were, one, that expectations are so high. This is an enormous challenge to have expectations so high, because we can't control the dreams of every person, right? And everybody is hoping for so much in a very short period of time. And that's the other challenge. High expectations, not much time, and of course not enough resources of any kind, human resources just being a part of that. So one of the things I think that's important is some kind of strategic priorities, to decide what comes first, what comes second, what comes third. I think that's important. Always trying to shape expectations, because not everything can be reformed in one day.
Are you saying focus?
Focus, and I would say slow down. Slow down a bit, because people need to breathe. Summer's coming. People need time off. Time to reflect. So much has happened this week. The template is there. The senior leader engagement has occurred. Now, in order for us to embark on a path that can really bring all of this to fruition, we need serious work. And serious work requires time. So I think slowing down a little bit, thinking together, talking together about what the plan is. It's the boring, day-to-day that's going to need to happen. Well, at the same time, we don't lose momentum. That's what I would say is the biggest challenge, is figuring out where to focus now and how to maintain the momentum while we are deciding where we're really going to focus. I think for us, clearly issues concerning the security situation in Afghanistan are going to continue to be important. That's going to be a key area of focus. I think in the private sector, they're going to be looking at this issue of focus in a different way. The individual companies that have their deals are going to be looking for their partners, and here's where what can Uzbeks expect? Those people who have partnerships with companies in the United States can expect that those partners are going to want to get to work and roll up their sleeves now. What's going to happen with the government regulations that are needed in order for business projects to move forward? What is going to be the tax regime? These are the kinds of things that people are going to need help with. So people bringing serious energy and focus is, I think, the next step, because so much is now possible, but you have to go step by step and focus.
And is Washington focused enough on Uzbekistan?
I would say yes. I think the thing to remember for the United States, is just the United States is a global country, and so our senior leadership is focused on many, many different things all at once. But clearly, those questions that concern the security of Americans wherever we are, those questions that concern the security of the global hotspots, that's going to be an area of where Washington is going to be laser focused. President Mirziyoyev had a meeting with Secretary Mattis and had a chance to discuss what it is that we really need in terms of security cooperation with Uzbekistan. Same thing with Secretary Pompeo. So yeah, I think Washington is appropriately focused on Uzbekistan. And of course, we have a wonderful set of people who are focused every day on Uzbekistan, and that is those workaday desk officers in the Department of Commerce, in the Department of Energy, and of course in the Department of State, who are thinking about Uzbekistan every day, working with the embassy here and trying to move things forward. So that's going to continue no matter what. And of course, as long as I'm in Tashkent, I'm going to be very focused on making things happen as well.
The biggest criticism, in our view, was that when presidents met, there was no mention of human rights issues in public. Specifically, the New York Times reported that President Trump did not mention the problem, Uzbekistan's horrible human rights record. Is that a bad move, diplomatically speaking?
Well, what I would say is human rights, of course, is always an important question in any relationship, and certainly that's been true, hardy perennial in our relationship with Uzbekistan. Where I would turn your attention is to the joint statement, which was the affirmation of both presidents of what they've agreed to. That was a meaty statement. I just came from a meeting in the State Department, and that was the word used by one of our senior officials concerning the economic relationship.
There's so much in it.
So much.
It's hard to process, I'll tell you that.
It's hard to process. But one of the things that's in it, Navbahor, is the issue of making progress on human rights. And that's a serious commitment. And I think especially following the commitment that President Mirziyoyev made at the UN General Assembly last September, the speeches he has made, including the one in which he said there would no longer be torture and that they would no longer accept evidence from torture in Uzbekistan, and of course the joint statement itself. Plus, you were at the dinner that was hosted by the government of Uzbekistan the other day, and what was in the letter directly from President Trump to President Mirziyoyev? A mention of human rights. And to his great credit, I would say that I was sitting in the meeting with between President Mirziyoyev and a few of our senior officials, and the issue of human rights did come up. And what President Mirziyoyev said is he's done many things and he's going to continue. The word I most often heard, and it was a very interesting one on the Uzbek side in many of the meetings, the process of change and reform is irreversible. And that word irreversible suggests a very serious commitment to all of these areas of change, including in the area of human rights. So we'll be looking closely at that. We need follow-up, but the commitment was made.
There was a lot of talk about military assistance, and President Trump talked about military assistance, which raised a lot of questions, and I was there when he said that, and I wanted to ask 10 questions about it. So, as you know, human rights, military assistance, they are inseparable. And I'm sure you won't be surprised to see a lot of statements calling for, to make human rights a priority as Uzbekistan and U.S. tries to improve its military cooperation. Isn't that a big challenge? Because both sides want military assistance right now. U.S. wants to provide military assistance, and Uzbeks are eager to have it. What is the strategy to deal with the human rights issue?
Well, I would say that this question and this tension, as you say yourself in your question, is something that we've seen over a long period of time. And there were many times when even providing the most anodyne, the most innocent kind of equipment to the government of Uzbekistan would have been extremely difficult. What has changed? What I would say has changed is the situation in Afghanistan. It's a very serious situation there. But I would also say that the human rights posture of the government has changed. What have we seen over the last couple of years? We've seen a huge move to eliminate child labor systematically. We now have decrees that say that forced labor, adult forced labor, not only in the cotton harvest, but in any area, is now not going to be tolerated. Non-government organizations, the development of civil society. This was a very important theme when Randy Berry was in Uzbekistan at the beginning of April. What has happened? A new law making it easier for both domestic and international NGOs to register. The area of religious freedom, what have we seen? In the past, a very, very stale conversation about what would it take to move from the religious harmony of which Uzbekistan is justifiably proud to permitting some religious groups that haven't had such an easy time to actually operate in the country. Now there's a roadmap that opens a dialogue to that conversation that simply didn't exist before. So if you take every area of human rights, and I haven't even talked about issues like the media, and again, you're an example of what is now becoming possible, we are seeing a willingness to have a dialogue and a willingness to engage in a process of change and reform that we haven't seen before. And I think that's going to have effects in lots of different places, including in our security assistance relationship. Now, where is the proof of that? I think that the members of our Congress have to be persuaded that these changes are deep and that they are real. But I think the conversation about providing assistance of various kinds, including security assistance, is now possible because of actions that the government of Uzbekistan has taken on its own. And the more that we hear that the people of Uzbekistan feel these changes and experience them, I think the more the trust level and comfort level will rise, and the feeling that we really are dealing with a new era in Uzbekistan, including in human rights.
Yes, and it's going to be a lot of work.
A lot of work, not going to be easy.
Yeah, and your time in Tashkent is ending.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, you've been witness to history.
I have indeed. I've been so fortunate.
And so when should we expect that change?
You know, I can't really say, because the issue of change is one that is driven by our White House.
It's slow.
It's slow, and it's a process that's jealously guarded, quite appropriately, by the president and his team, because the ambassador is the president's representative. But I think the expectation, since I have been there almost 3.5 years, is that sometime in the summer or fall there will probably be a transition. But exactly when doesn't depend on me. It depends on the members of Congress. It depends on the whole vetting process, and that's not just true for our new ambassador who's going to be going out to Uzbekistan, but really for any country. And so I would just urge people to be patient. I know they're going to be very excited when the new person comes, and I will be working for the improvement of Uzbek-U.S. relations until I step on the plane to come back to the United States. So.
And then afterwards, we definitely want to rely on your insights and expertise too.
Absolutely.
But you're a female diplomat, rare. African American ambassador, very rare, especially in a society like Uzbekistan, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, it's safe to say that you'll be remembered for many, many things. How do you see your own legacy?
Well, first of all, Navapur, I would just like to say a word of thanks to everybody in Uzbekistan, because I have been so welcomed and so embraced, really from the very first moment I got there and shook hands with the foreign minister, who received a copy of my credentials 48 hours after I arrived in country. And then not 10 days later, I presented my credentials to the late President Karimov. And really, ever since then, I have been warmly embraced everywhere I have gone in the country, whether it has been the well-known sites in Uzbekistan, Samarkand, Bukhara, Khiva, or whether I was in Mingtepe, where I was recently in the Fergana Valley, or wherever I have gone, in Termez, people have embraced me with such warmth, and I have so appreciated the way I have been received in Uzbekistan, my opportunity to serve there. My legacy, I hope, is to have brought a feeling of hope and renewal, that a different kind of relationship was possible, and now we're seeing the fruit of that. I also want to say that it's been exciting to work with young people and to hear their dreams and to try to help give them a sense of the future. I've been very, very proud of that. And then a huge vote of a word of thanks to all of my colleagues at the State Department and in the interagency at the NSC. They have believed in me. And so the success of this relationship that we are now seeing is the fruit of the efforts of many people, not just myself. I'm fortunate to be a diplomat in the United States, a country where a career like mine is possible. And my hope is that careers like mine and careers like yours, because you're also a person who is a leader and a trailblazer, will become more possible, not only for the two of us, but for many, many, many other people. The thing I hear over and over and over again, not only as a woman and an African American, as a diplomat, but just as a person living in the modern world, is that role models are so important. And that's why I hope my career has been, my model or my example is out there for everyone to see, and so is yours. And I know that a whole generation of journalists are going to learn their craft from watching you. And so each of us has had a role to play at an historic moment in the history of this fabulous country, Uzbekistan, and the United States, of course. And I think the foundation has been laid. And now my successor can go and build on that. And you will have a new opportunity in a completely different setting and way of carrying out your role to also show what is journalism, what is reporting, what is media. And that's going to make a big difference in Uzbekistan. So I think we've each had a role to play, and I'm very grateful for that.
A lot of challenges in front of us.
Many challenges, but you know,
yes.
Challenges are a part of life every day. It's raining outside today, so that's a challenge for some people. The traffic is bad, and that's a challenge.
Yes.
You know, there's not ever going to be enough money and resources to do all the things we want to do. The challenges are legion, but the key is, can we keep ourselves focused? Can we keep ourselves optimistic enough to pursue the opportunities? We want to keep ourselves focused on what's possible. We can always focus on what's not possible and all the ways that we can be stuck, that people can get in our way. But what we want to do is stay patient, and we want to stay determined that we are going to find that opportunity and we're going to pursue it, because it's possible. Something new is possible. And I think, again, Uzbekistan's president is seeing the world in a way that whoever would have imagined in 2016 that we would be seeing the world the way we're seeing it now, from Tashkent, from Khiva, from all the different cities in Uzbekistan. It's why? Because the president of Uzbekistan, helped by many, many people, including Foreign Minister Kamilov, a long-term optimist about this relationship, who worked in the darkest days of the relationship with a long-term vision of what was possible. Senator Safayev, the same way. Akmal Saidov, the same way. So many different people. Ms. Artikova, also a role model and a trailblazer in Uzbekistan. So many different people have believed in this relationship through thick and thin, and now we are seeing something different.
And you have a new generation also coming in.
Yes,
you have new faces, new players,
do.
yes.
And I wish them every success. It's wonderful to see all the new energy. And it also takes that older generation having faith that they can let go. And there's, in spite of all the challenges of resources, including human resources, people can help each other. I saw this in the delegation in Uzbekistan. Some people who are very experienced and other people who are very new, working together and helping each other. That's what it's going to take for Uzbekistan to realize this incredible vision of President Mirziyoyev and our president for the relationship.
Thank you so much.
You are welcome, and
Really
the very
enjoyed that
best to you,
conversation.
Navbahor. You are tremendous, just such great energy.
Thank you so
And
much.
what you have been doing to explain Uzbekistan to us, to explain the United States to Uzbekistan. We're very grateful for that, and I'm delighted that you're going to have some new opportunities. And my hope is that you're the trailblazer, and we're going to see your team expand over time, and we're going to see other journalists come as well, not only from other parts of this structure, but from the private media sector, from the independent media sector. That's going to do so much to change perceptions, to help people learn how to digest media in a new way, and to help build a new kind of Uzbekistan, which is, I think, the hope of the joint statement signed by both, or that affirmed by both President Trump and President Mirziyoyev.
Oh yeah,
So
we'll be
thank
closely
you.
watching, and that'll be a real opening, actually.
Yes, it will. Yes, it will. I'm determined. I'm hopeful that I will be able to come back in, say, 5 years and really see things take off.
And
from
say,
this
see what
wonderful way.
happened?
And see what happened. We were there at the beginning.
We watched it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Katta rahmat sizga.
Rahmat, rahmat.
So we talked to Ambassador Pamela Spratlen, who came here all the way from Tashkent, and as she just said, she'll be there through the summer at least.
Yes. I can't say specifically how long I'll be there, because as I said, it doesn't depend on me. But as long as I am there, everybody can know that I'm going to be working very hard to build that relationship and leave a great legacy for my successor.
Thank you so much.
You're
Thank you so much. I'm now Bahor Imamova from Washington. Thank you for watching us.